Truth wears no mask, seeks neither place nor applause, bows to no human shrine. She only asks a hearing. A very pleasant good day to you wherever you may be, and welcome to the University of Common Sense. My name is Tim Morrow, and we're doing an interview with Keisha Estevan, and we're talking about dialysis. This is part 2. If you missed part 1, there is a part 1. But anyway, we're going to continue this interview, and I don't want to waste a minute because you can call it an interview or a nightmare. I know that there are people out there that are on the dialysis machine and wondering if they're doing the right thing. Well, listen closely. For those of you who may be thinking about going on it, you're switching from the known to the unknown. In flying, there is a saying, you never switch from the known to the unknown. Because if you're switching from one tank to the other, and the other tank says it's full, maybe there's a blockage in the line. So if you're going to switch while you're at 10,000 feet, not when you're at 1,000 feet. It's switching from the known to the unknown. And one of the things that I see in the medical field is that you switch from a bad dream at home to a nightmare in the hospital. That's what we're talking about now. We're talking about a nightmare that goes on in the dialysis centers across the world, and across the country. And we're talking about the people who make a living off of human misery. And some of those people are doctors who have found a very lucrative field in purchasing dialysis centers. Let's get back to Keisha. Keisha, tell me this. How did you get that job to begin with?
I was at a dialysis treatment with my dad. I had to make him go, and I had to sit there while they hooked him up to the machine, because otherwise he wouldn't have done it. They would have ended up calling me, and I would have had to go down there anyway, because he had gotten to the point where he didn't want to go anymore, and he didn't want to be hooked up to the machine.
Was your dad immobile?
No, he was fine. He used to drive himself and drive himself home.
What was your thinking in getting your father there? What was your thinking?
That I had to hurry and get him there, or something was going to happen to him. He would die.
So in other words, they told you that the only thing that would keep him alive was the dialysis.
Yeah. And his eating. They really made sure that he couldn't drink more than they told him to drink. He had to drink a certain amount of water and juices.
So you were the kind of the guardian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I had to go, and I had to make sure that he stayed in his chair and got his full 3 hours.
Is all treatments 3 hours?
Yes, unless you get sick or unless you pass out, which my dad did. He passed out, and he fell out of his chair.
You know what I don't know? I don't know exactly how the treatment is done. Are they laying down? Are they setting up? What's going on? They're
in the chairs that you can move them back and forth, and like a recliner. They're all in recliner chairs. So some of the patients will sit up when they're not feeling well, and then they'll just fall over and pass out on the floor. They'll start throwing up.
What happened when that would happen?
The patient that threw up, we almost lost her. Her eyes kind of rolled in the back of her head, and they just pulled her all the way back and called the doctor, and I just kind of left out. But yeah, they called the doctor right away, or the RN that's on duty at that time. She'll come.
Is there a doctor on staff at all times?
No, just the RNs. The doctors come in every once in a while and check all the patients, and then he leaves. He or she leaves. There's not one there all the time. But see, the clinic I worked at, the hospital was just a few feet away. So
Oh.
whenever the patients needed to go to the hospital, I would just put them in the wheelchair and push them right on over to the emergency room.
Oh, really?
And I would see the patients going in convulsions or having seizures, and I knew he's not going to come back. He's not going to make it.
And they wouldn't come back?
Or I would walk in and there's an empty chair. Or I watched one patient commit suicide. She just overdosed on drugs, went and locked herself in her apartment, and she died. She killed herself. I watched this one young girl, it's 18.
She was 18 years old?
Yeah, she can't handle it. A lot of the patients, they can't handle it anymore, and then they go and they start doing other drugs.
Oh, really?
Because they can't handle the dialysis.
So there's a continuous nightmare going on there.
It doesn't end. One man, he's been there for over 20 years.
On the dialysis machine, he's lasted 20 years?
He's the only one I know.
How strong?
For 20 years.
Not going 3 times a week.
Yes, he does. He goes 3 times a week. But they all just sit there and they would just talk and just, a lot of them didn't want to come. They didn't.
You mentioned during break that if a person wanted to get off, they got on there and wanted to get off of the machine so they didn't want any more.
Yeah.
What would then happen?
Well, the nurses suggest that you have your whole 3 hours, but a lot of the patients couldn't handle it. They would get sick and they were like, yeah, get me off. Sometimes they would get really upset and violent. We had a patient that just yanked out his tubes because they wouldn't take them off. But when the patient asked to be taken off, you're supposed to take them off. And they're supposed to sign a form saying that they want to be released. They want to be off the machine. And you're supposed to let them. You're not supposed to, I mean, if that's what they want to do, then you have to do that. And they would become violent.
Can you blame them?
Well, I don't blame them.
They also have a home treatment.
Yes.
What's the difference in the home treatment? How is it some get home treatment and others have to go?
Well, it's the patient's choice. That's a different type of surgery. You don't have a graft. You have, it's a bag that's put in your abdomen. I don't really know much about it, but I do know enough to where they would have to pick up their solution. It's a bag that they take the tube and they stick it through there's a hole here, and they stick it in there to clean out the bag that's inserted in their abdomen.
Oh.
So, I mean, I don't really know. It doesn't have anything to do with hemodialysis. It's 2 different things and 2 different. I worked in hemodialysis. But I would see the patients come in to pick up their bags, their solution, and their needles, and they would stick themselves. They would do it at home.
Did they also, they didn't have the shunt though?
No, but they had a lot of problems with the area being infected because they have to be very sterile and clean. I thought that was kind of disgusting too, And then if you couldn't make it on that, then they would put you on the hemodialysis machine. And sometimes, I mean, I don't think that they even know if you need it or not. They would have patients come that didn't even need the dialysis. We had a young guy come just for the one time, by accident.
Oh, really?
He wasn't supposed to come to the clinic and be dialyzed. He was fine. But now he has to walk around the rest of his life with the graft under his arm. Young guy.
You mean they wouldn't take the graft out?
Well, nobody usually does. I don't know if anybody's ever taken one out. I don't know about that. But he still has it under there, under his skin.
Do these grafts, do they ever get infected? I mean, what I mean is not during a treatment where the person in the middle of the night has to wake up and have this problem, would they have to then be rushed to?
Yeah, you would take yourself or call one of your family members. But it happened to my dad. He would wake up in like puddles of blood in the night.
Really?
And just pass out.
How long did your dad last on the machine?
Almost 2 years. Almost 2 years. Because they said he had some other stuff too. High blood pressure, and that's what caused his dialysis.
Are you aware that the biggest reason for the dialysis machine today, the biggest reason why people are on the dialysis machine today is because of the drugs that they take?
Yes, I know.
Drugs breaks down the kidneys. Okay, but even with the kidneys broken down, the body does not need a dialysis machine.
No.
It doesn't. It simply doesn't work. Aside from that, every 11 months you have a new set of kidneys. Do you know what I mean? It's just according to what you built them with. And that's the pitiful thing. We are getting into a field that is so lucrative when we get into what is known as the harvest. The harvest is transplants.
Oh.
Your life is at stake because they can kill you and give it to some guy that can afford to pay $1 million. And everybody grows their own organs. You know what I mean? Every 11 months we have a new set of organs. But it is, it's such a lucrative field that literally people are being killed in the hospital for their organs.
But they don't know that. The patients don't know that. And the doctors aren't going to tell them. And if they would go to the doctors with what you just said, I mean, the doctors would laugh at them.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and say, that's not true. And I did. We had a few patients that had a kidney transplant, but they ended back on dialysis with somebody else's kidney this time. So they never made it through that either. And then they just give you more drugs. Benadryl is one of the biggest.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they get 3 times every hour.
Did you ever have any personal relationships with any of the?
All of them. All of them. Every one of them.
I know that it's totally against the law for you to suggest anything to them other than what they're doing on that dialysis machine. But did anybody ever do that? Did you ever suggest that the person don't take another treatment? But
there's nothing else for them to do. They don't
know any place else to turn.
It's just me telling them, who are they going to believe, me or them? But
do you ever see any of these patients now? You ever talk?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I don't intend to make you cry, but there are just things that we need to know and information that we need to pass to people. And that's the reason why I'm talking to you like this, because we're an information center. And if we save one person from that dialysis machine, because at this minute somebody's looking at this and they're saying, God, I don't want to go to no dialysis machine. You know?
They don't have to. They can call you with the number.
Yes.
But they would all come in. I would even say, look at this guy. He looks so healthy. Come in with a head full of hair, just like anxious in a way because he's going to be better, thinking he's going to be better. And then a couple of months later, they're yellow, their skin's yellow, and they look dried up, and they all start driving. Then later they have to have transportation because they can't drive anymore.
Oh, you mean they can't drive for the dialysis treatment?
No, none of our patients, I think maybe 1 or 2 used to drive, and my dad. But the other ones, they had to have transportation, but Medicare or Medicaid, they're going bankrupt, so they can't pay for you unless if you really cannot walk. then they'll pay for your
That's a
transportation.
blessing, maybe. Maybe that's a blessing for crying out loud.
I never thought about it that way, but yeah, you're right.
Maybe that's
You're
absolutely a blessing. It's that they can't afford to go.
Uh-huh.
Wow, God's got all kinds of ways of blessing us, you know.
He does.
And that very well may be one of them.
And that's when I left, that's what was going on. Right now, I'm not really sure, but I know that they're bankrupt now. And they can't pay those transportation companies, or they cost a fortune. They cost a fortune to go every week. They're making money too.
Oh yes, yes. One time, I had my car was being worked on, and I said, right across from where I was, there's a dialysis center. Brand new, they built it. I watched them build it up from the ground, and I asked the guy, you know, who. After they were almost done with building, I said, what's that going to be? He said, that's going to be the dialysis center. And I said, really? So one day, maybe a year after it was open, I was having some work done on my car, and I was standing there, and I was looking across, one of these trucks bringing in 8 or 10 patients. And I looked, and all the patients were black. Mm-hmm. So I went over and asked the guy, he's an attendant,
Yes.
probably doing what you were doing. And I said to him, well, you know, what is this? And he explained to me what it was. And I said, well, I noticed that most of the people that got out, all of the people that got out of that man were all black. And he goes, well, yeah, he said, you know, that's because because we suffer with high blood pressure.
Yes.
I said, oh, really? And he goes, well, yeah. I said, well, how do you know? I said, well, that's what they tell me. And that's the reason why it's more blacks on there. Mm-hmm. In fact, only 12% of the population in this country is black.
Yeah.
And 70% of the people on the dialysis machine
are black.
Is black.
And Hispanic.
And Hispanic.
There's millions of Hispanics. Millions, especially the ones that don't speak English. They even have ones they're dialyzing that aren't even supposed to be here.
Oh, really?
Yes. Who's afraid? And this one guy, he's probably only alive because he's afraid to go to the doctors because they might find out that he's not supposed to be here. So he won't go to the doctors. And he comes to dialysis when he wants to.
So in other words, if you don't show up, let's say that you show up once a week, you're supposed to show up 3 times a week.
Oh, God. That's that guy. He does it because he's afraid, and he's fine. But they really get on him bad. They get on him really bad. They even changed his days because the nurses didn't want to work with him because he didn't show up when he was supposed to.
So they want you there.
Mm-hmm. And then they were asking me what's the matter with me. I just got sick and tired of watching it. And they didn't want to hear my mouth because I was always speaking the truth. And they said, if you feel that way, then you shouldn't be working here. Like, they're just going to end up dead. And sometimes they would try to hide it from me.
Oh, really?
Like, hide things from me. Or I come in and say, where's Mr. So-and-so? Oh, he's not going to be in today. But I knew. I would go over to the hospital. I would just walk right on over there and see if he was there and what's the matter. Why was he there?
You mean many times he'd be dead?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Anybody die on the machine while taking treatments?
Not while I was there. The one guy that didn't have a pulse, they brought him back. So no, he came back, and they brought him over to the hospital. Because the hospital, it only takes 2 seconds. You're out the side door, and the patient's there in the emergency room. So the ones that did pass out, I mean, they would always, end up bringing him back. But I've never seen anybody actually die on the machine.
But it didn't make any difference. Once you came back from the passing out or whatever it was back to the machine.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody ever discharged from the machine? I mean, just didn't need the treatments anymore?
No. Mm-mm. No.
Are you aware that the government subsidizes every person that goes on the machine, even if it's paid for by an insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
The government subsidized. And the reason why the doctors find this so lucrative is, see, 30 years ago maybe, doctors used to own pharmacies. Doctors used to own the pharmacy that was downstairs from their office. Well, they came with a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
And so doctors can no longer own pharmacies. And that's probably 30, 35 years old. They can no longer own pharmacies. However, they can own stock in pharmaceutical companies.
Okay.
And many pharmaceutical companies give 25, 30,000 shares of stocks to a doctor so he can write prescriptions. Well, that was fairly lucrative, but it's nothing like the dialysis machine, because the dialysis center they can own outright.
Yes, and they do.
The place that I was talking about, the guy that owned it, that built it from the ground, he is an East Indian doctor.
Yeah, most of them are.
He's an East Indian doctor. And if you go in to him, and we've made it our business to go in with 10 different things, 10 different illnesses. And every one of us was told we needed to go on the dialysis machine.
You see that?
And immediately, that your kidneys are not functioning, even though he never even took a test. Never
That's
took a
what
test.
happens a lot. When right before I left, that's why I left. It was because all of the patients were becoming older senior citizens because they needed to fill up those chairs. I mean, if you don't fill up the chairs, then you have to close the unit, you know. So all the patients were coming in, senior citizens, barely can talk, barely speak English, and putting them on
So in other
dialysis.
words, senior citizens are filling up a lot of these chairs at the dialysis center. They're defenseless.
They are.
Sure, of course they'd want them.
I was even gonna at one time going into therapy to because I wanted to give my dad one of my kidneys.
Oh, really?
Yep, I was gonna do that, thinking that that was okay.
What changed your mind?
He died.
Oh.
But then my dad had told me that he didn't want me to do that because he's already lived his life, you know, and what happens if one of my kids might need it? Now, this is before I found out. I found out about the dialysis. But I just wish I would have known.
Are you aware that one of the ways that they get their people is that your mother or your father died from anything to do with the kidneys? They will come to you and say, you must have all your children checked out because inherently had these weekends. I'm sure that he passed them on.
Yeah.
That's the way
they wanted to do that to me because my mom died from cancer, they said, and they removed one of her breasts. So they said that it's hereditary, and they wanted me to have surgery on mine, and I never went back. When he told me that he wanted to cut on me, I never went back. And they kept calling me, and I went. They set the surgery date and everything. And I'm fine. I'm fine.
What did they want to do the surgery for? Biopsies? Or what?
They wanted to do a biopsy because they said I had a lump, and it could be cancerous. And they wanted to take it off. I mean, they wanted to take out the fluid or whatever. I don't know. I never went back. And I'm fine. I never went back to the doctors ever since then. And I don't take my kids either.
You are the doctor for your children.
Yes, I am.
You are the doctor for your children. And there is no other doctor, unless it's the Father. But you are totally responsible to God. Forget man. You're responsible to God for the health and the welfare of your children. If you don't know how to take care of your children, then you must learn. That's the reason why they were born to you and not the doctor.
And they don't really know. What got me was I had a back pain once, and I was trying to explain it to the doctor, but how are they going to know what's wrong with you unless you tell them?
Right.
So they take everything that you tell them and they concoct up whatever they want to do and say, oh, it's this. And you have to take this. Says who?
Exactly.
So,
well, that's the whole idea. That's the reason why we're trying here to tell people to take control over your life, because most of the doctors are sicker than you are.
yeah, they are.
You know, he's the one that needs to be on the dialysis machine.
And most of them smoke.
Yes, I know. And that's the reason why here at the University of Common Sense, the number one thing we want to do is give out information. And we want to give out the truth. Now, the truth is not popular. It doesn't make me popular either. But it is the truth. And somebody wants the truth. And that's what we're about. Thanks again for your time.
Okay.
Thanks for your effort. Thanks for sharing your experiences. I have some people back in Washington, D.C. that have been waiting for this tape to be made. And I can't get it back there fast enough. And there is a couple of doctors back there that's taken all of their patients off of the dialysis machine. I mean, taking them off. And thank God for them.
Wow.
They're the ones who want to see
my
these
God.
tapes. And so you have no idea as to what you're doing, what you're
That's
doing to
good.
help people understand and know about this. That's the reason why at the University of Common Sense, we always say growing old does not make us sick. It is growing sick that makes us old. For the University of Common Sense, speaking on behalf of my guests, thank you very much for listening, and we sure hope you'll see us next time.